Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the FactFinder podcast, Winning the E-commerce Game in DIY, the ROPO Effect. Pretty shortly, we'll be starting. We're going to give people a minute or so to join. And during that time, I've got a quick survey for you. So if you could complete that, that'd be wonderful. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. One is that you are all on mute at the moment. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and there is a chat box and a questions area. It should be in the top right-hand corner of your screen. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, or you have any experiences you want to share with us today, please do type them in the chat box, and we'd be more than happy to answer them at some point today. Now, I'm going to pop a poll up on the screen in front of you here, and it's a very simple question. Just want to understand exactly where everybody is in the audience. So how familiar are you with the ROPO concept? You've got several answers down there. Just pick the one that best fits you. So whether you're a ROPO expert or whether you've never heard of it before. As we said, we'll give you guys a minute just to answer there and to let other people join in. I think most of you have interacted with that poll. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for your answers there. So just for anyone who has now joined, welcome to the webinar. I'm going to close this poll off and I will share the results with you here. Most of you are not very familiar with ROPO. That's great. That's actually really great. We've got no one who's a ROPO expert. So that's wonderful. You're in the right place. We're hopefully going to teach you a little bit about ROPO, what the research online purchase offline phenomenon is all about, and how you guys can take advantage of it. So without further ado, let's get started. So thank you again for joining us today. Like I said, this webinar is Winning the E-commerce Game in DIY, the ROPO Effect. And just to introduce ourselves briefly, my name is Gordon Thomson. I'm an e-commerce solution specialist with FactFinder, and I will be your moderator today. We have with us a very special guest, and we're really, really grateful to have him here today. He is the MD of Insight Retail Group and also the executive editor for Insight DIY. He's had nearly 10 years in this role, and prior to that, 20 years of sales and marketing experience within the DIY space. He's a well-known keynote speaker and panelist, and you may have seen him very recently at the DIY Summit in Dublin. He's internationally known, and we're really, really pleased to have Steve Collinge joining us today. So hello, Steve.
Hi, Gordon. Thank you for that introduction. Afternoon, everybody.
So we're just going to jump straight in. Steve, obviously you've seen the results of the poll there. Some people are more or less familiar with it, but most people are not familiar with the ROPO concept. So tell us a little bit about what it is and why it's important.
I have to say, probably 6-7 months ago, I was also unfamiliar with this particular term, which is clearly research online, purchasing offline, which is so appropriate to the home improvement industry. I think what's changed in the last 6 months really is the increased ability we now have to track this behavior. It's something we've been aware of and we're familiar with in the sense of that's how consumers shop home improvement. They're searching for products either to compare price or look for deals or even look for their local store and then go and purchase offline. But the important thing now is how we're able to track this.
Yeah, I understand. Obviously, it's become quite a trend due to the fact that the majority of people are now researching online, but it is very much widely misunderstood within the e-commerce marketplace.
It is, and for home improvement retailers, it's one of those digital challenges that once again they have to get their heads around. The danger, as we'll see as we go through the presentation, is they're not able to be right at the forefront of that purchase process when people are either looking for ideas or they're looking for solutions or they're looking for inspiration. If you're not playing in that game, then ultimately you may lose out on that purchase because that consumer will choose to purchase elsewhere and they may not ultimately end up in your particular bricks and mortar store.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're talking a little bit about the DIY market, the home improvement market. Obviously, this is a trend that really is quite crucial for DIY retailers, for home improvement retailers.
It's fundamentally important. As I said before, in terms of the purchase process, when you're buying home improvement products. Normally there's two routes that you will take. Either you're looking for those ideas, inspiration, you're putting a new deck into the garden, or you're looking for colours to paint your room, or you're looking for a solution. And if you're looking for a solution to a problem, it can be as simple as replacing a washer on a tap, or something like that, where you've got a problem in your home, you're trying to resolve that. The first port of call now for anybody is going to go online to try and find the answer to that problem or those ideas. It's not a simple purchase. I mean, the reality is that there are many, many different reasons why people visit home improvement stores. Kingfisher did some work recently where they've identified almost 400 different shopping projects, from the simplest, the replacing of a light bulb or a tap washer, right the way through to the most complex, which may be a new kitchen or bathroom, an extension, building your own home. And each of those projects have a different route in terms of how the consumers will look for their answers or look for their help to be able to make that purchase. It's much more complicated than almost any other retail industry. So it's very different to grocery. It's very different to pharmaceuticals, to electrical. It is quite a different and more complex purchase process.
Yeah, and when you add to that the complexity of the customer base as well, we did a webinar recently where we kind of divided it into your professionals and your, for want of a better word, amateurs. But I think you can segment it even further as you've done here, and you just see the diversity of the customers as well as the actual projects and the products.
It's pretty much everybody, from the point at which people either rent or own their first home, right the way to late retirement. Everybody within those consumer groups are available and interested and will be engaging with the home improvement market at some stage, either in a significant way, if they're moving home regularly and doing up that home and moving on, or quite simply they've moved into their first rental property and they want some storage or they want to paint the walls. Every consumer is open and available and interested within home improvement and garden market.
And they've all got the same idea in mind, really, which is...
It's fundamental to them. This goes right back to the emotional requirement we have as human beings. We all want fabulous homes and we want lovely gardens. It drives us, and it's the motivator, which means that we will always be searching, always looking. I mean, many consumers will just be looking for ideas for the future. They may not even have a project in mind. They may have some money and think, right, what can I do now to the garden? And those days of walking to a garden centre looking for those solutions, that may still happen further down the line, but the start point will be looking at either retailers' websites or looking at Instagram or Pinterest or House for those sorts of ideas.
Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is that, as we've discussed in the past, the market really is still growing, and it's fairly evident here that the market is still growing.
It continues to grow across Europe, in the US, in Australia. And let's be absolutely clear about this. So there's a huge amount of retail disruption, but it's the channels to market which are disrupted. It is not the markets that are disrupted. Consumers still want those home and garden products, whether they're purchasing themselves or a tradesperson is doing the work for them. Those products are still being purchased somewhere from one of those channels. It may be an established bricks and mortar store, or it may be one of the new channels, or it may be a pure play retailer. The market is still growing. However you look at this, it's the piece between the consumers and the actual products being used themselves, which is where the disruption is.
Yeah, we had a forecast. We looked at some data which showed that a forecast of the next 5 years, the e-commerce side of DIY is growing at an alarmingly quick rate. So between 50 and 60% over the next 5 years of growth in the actual e-commerce side. But you combine that with the fact that the statistics show that most people, over 3/4 of people, prefer buying tools and hardware in store. So it really does embody the sort of ROPO trend that we're seeing here.
Yeah, and home improvement has been behind the curve for some time. We're still looking at probably around about high single-digit penetration now. If you look at the Home Depot, look at B&Q, look at the other retailers, it tends to be sitting somewhere between 7, 9, just about getting into 10% of their business is online. And that is what is now changing, because you've got consumers coming into this market for the first time who will only have ever purchased or use their mobiles to search for things online. And that's what's causing this growth at the moment. And it is nowhere near the rate of acceleration that I believe we're going to see in terms of online purchasing and sourcing of home improvement and garden products.
Yeah, and now I find this really fascinating when we spoke about this, that, due to the sheer amount of choice and information and availability of information that consumers have now, the buying power has shifted
significantly. Let's go back 40, 50 years. The big brands had the power. They could choose the retail outlets that they were going to allow to stock their products. It was, it was as simple as that. It probably only happens these days with the likes of some brands like Apple and high-end watches and jewelry and those types of products. But that all changed in the early 80s and the 90s, and even in the last 10, 15 years. What has happened? That buying power shifted to the retailers. As they opened more and more stores, there was a space race, and as they developed own label to have more control over those categories, ultimately in home improvement, you will shop 9 times out of 10 at the nearest store to you. You're not going to go around 3 different stores comparing a bag of screws and nails. It's not going to happen. You'll go to the nearest store to you. And before the internet, consumers could only choose from the products that had been selected by those buying teams on those shelves. That was the only choice we had. That was where the power sat. What's happened in the last 5 to 10 years, and particularly in the last 3 to 5 years, is this has now shifted. The power has moved into the hands of the consumers. They can buy from any number of sources, search for any home improvement product on Google. Just look how many retailers there are, both established bricks and mortar players, online only businesses, who are now able to offer those products to you. And the power is now in the hands of the consumers to choose where to buy. That's what's causing the issues, because the retailers are 2 steps behind where consumers are now, desperately trying to catch up with them at the moment. But the consumers are racing ahead with their purchase behavior.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it does make for a sort of a complex buying process now, because the consumer's got so much power and because they have so many options. You find that ROPO is not just, okay, they look at something online, they buy it offline. It's a combination of different factors.
It is, and gosh, I wish it was simple in terms of the purchase process that they took, because it would be so much easier for the brands and the retailers to be able to engage with those consumers at the right time to convince them to make that purchase. But depending on the product, depending on the category, the retailer, the project in hand, there are any number of different touch points in terms of how consumers are engaging. Just look at paint as an example. People may initially search online for the range of colours available, but they then may go back to bricks and mortar stores 2 or 3 times to buy tester pots. And that is very different to if you're purchasing a power tool or accessories that go with that. So it's incredibly complicated.
Well, yeah, there's been numerous studies done, and there's been a couple by Brilliance and Essential Retail, which really fit here. That they're saying that basically over 50% of purchases that were made in store track back to e-commerce activity, and over 50% of sales that were made in e-commerce platforms can track back to in-store activity. So there's this real crossover between the two, and you've now got only 8% of people that said they never research online before purchasing.
Which is why, it's so good. Which is why it's so critical to have this 360-degree view of the consumer, so you know what they're doing. You know when they're in store, you know when they're online, and you can track and measure the activity as a retailer that you're implementing.
Yeah, and I think the really fascinating thing on this slide is if we look at the bottom right-hand corner there, where you see that double the amount of people who visit a store first, then purchase online, do that same activity, but they research first online. So the chances are that they're much more likely to have researched where your store is or what your store stocks before going to the store, before then going back home to buy it online. It's incredible. So.
Absolutely, and it just shows the importance of the store as well within home improvement. It's absolutely critical. More than 90% of all those home improvement garden purchases are still being made in a store or related to that store. It's critical that you have both this omnichannel strategy covering both online and stores.
So you mentioned obviously that there is a home improvement buying process is very defined. Talk us through the importance of this process and how it pertains to ROPO.
I don't think this buying process has been any different for the last 50 years and probably won't be for the next 50. I touched on it before, but consumers start the process, whether it's a very simple weekend project. You need a new lawnmower, you need something for the garden, and within 24 hours the product is identified, purchased and being used, through to maybe a 12, 18-month process of identifying a new kitchen. People start with this hunger and this need for inspiration, ideas. That's always stage one, or the solution to the problem. Stage two is all about that search. Now, that search 25 years ago was done digging out the yellow pages or going down to your local store or opening up the newspaper to see what offers were available. Now the number of touch points and ability for the retailers to get to consumers is vast. But stage two is critically important as well. What I'm seeing these days is that the established home improvement and garden retailers are not engaging sufficiently in stage one. There is not enough inspiration and ideas out there. There's some, don't get me wrong, I don't want to be overcritical, but consumers are now, they've found new sources for the inspiration ideas. They are looking at Instagram, they are creating their own Pinterest boards, and they're using House to get these ideas. And then at the retailer search section, again, the main established retailers are trying to compete with the online players who are throwing everything, are trying to appear top of the Google search rankings to be found. So what you're finding is many retailers are being boxed off within the actual purchase position of this process. They are opening the doors on their stores at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and they are using hope as a strategy that the consumers are still going to come in their droves. And even when they do, they don't know who those consumers are when they've bought something and walked away again. And then the final part of the process is obviously using those products and either doing the job yourself or actually getting somebody else to complete the project for you. And equally what you're finding there is that a number of retailers are pulling away from actually doing those tasks, leaving that to other businesses, whether it's Amazon Home Services or IKEA TaskRabbit to do those jobs for you. So I see a huge amount of risk if you are retail and you're only playing in one or two of these four areas. You have to be visible. You have to be engaging with consumers and offering help. It's not always about selling products. It's about helping them at every stage in this process.
Yeah. I mean, the first two stages of that seem so critical with DIY and home improvement, because it is very much an inspirational and in some cases aspirational purchase when people are looking to do up their homes. And so I can understand why it's very difficult to capture that market, but also absolutely essential. So I'm going to launch another quick poll just to find out what people think about how well their company is catering to the first and second stage of this buying process. So you should see it appear on your screen now, and it goes on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being really badly and 5 being very, very well. There's nothing you can do to improve. So how well does your company cater to inspiration and idea formation and product retailer and service search, the first two stages of the home improvement buying process? Okay, I'll just a few seconds there. We've got some results coming through now. And I think that's everyone who... Anybody else wants to answer? Now's the time. Okay, we'll close that off. And I'll share the results with you now. And you'll see that the vast majority here, Steve, are saying 3 and below.
Yeah.
So it is. I think you seem to be on the money here. It does seem to be an issue. We've only got 18% saying 4 or 5. And that's understandable, but we can see obviously that it is crucial. So moving on now. ROPO and Omnichannel, I think we've established here that they really do go hand in hand.
This is fundamental to retailing. I heard or saw an interesting quote the other day about we should take the E off the front of e-commerce as a definition, because it is just about commerce. Consumers now have an expectation, whether you're a brand, when you're a brand, you're dealing with them, whether it's online, in store, on the telephone, you're the same company. This has only ended up as two distinct parts of businesses, online and bricks and mortar, because of the way that the internet has developed and online has grown so rapidly over the last 10 to 15 years. You are one business dealing with a range of consumers, and that omnichannel piece now is critical. You've got to be speaking the same language and helping those consumers and building the same expectations. So if you're great at helping people in store, you should be great at helping people online as well, in terms of whether it's ideas, inspiration, or product search, or price, or whatever it is that your business is focusing on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of research that's been done into this omnichannel because now there's so many omnichannel retailers, and they do struggle to create a unified brand. In fact, 78% of them realistically admitted that they don't have a good omnichannel strategy. But you can see from this slide that the results in the short term are very, very clear in terms of higher lifetime value of your customer, your higher transaction sizes. But there's been an Aberdeen Group research study that shows that the year-on-year increase in annual revenue is close to 10% if you have a defined omnichannel approach. If you don't, it's down around 3.4%.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And also, like, if you think about the fact that it says here, 30% higher lifetime value from your customers, Aberdeen Group found also that the retention rate of customers for companies who had a defined omnichannel approach was 89% compared to 33% for those whose strategy was weak in that area. So if you think about a 30% higher lifetime value and more customers staying loyal to you, it really is a no-brainer that you need to develop a strategy in this area.
It is absolutely that clear. But let's also make an important point here that in a very complicated market such as home improvement, where people's knowledge is limited, having stores is a distinct competitive advantage for retailers, because if they do well online and they have the store option for consumers to go to, you're in a far, far better place than a business that is pure play and can only sell to consumers online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really incredible phenomenon. We're just going to take a quick pause just to remind people that I can see there are already some questions coming through. We will have a question and answer session towards the end. So any questions, please do type them into the questions section. And if you've got any that you actually want to voice to me personally, then please do give me a call. My phone number is on the screen in front of you there, or send me an email, gordon.thompson@fact-finder.com. I'll be more than happy to answer any more complex or sort of longer questions personally by email or by phone. But do remember, we will be trying to answer some of your questions at the end. So moving on, we've talked about the past, we've talked about the present. What does the future look like in terms of challenges and opportunities for the DIY sector?
The opportunity or challenge of millennials is often talked about these days and raised by many businesses, and they're adapting to deal with this. But the reality within home improvement, and it goes back to a fantastic quotation from Goldman Sachs from a couple of years ago, and they spoke about the largest generation in human history is just about to reach prime spending age. So they are now renting, buying for the first time, and the way that they purchase, the way that they search for products is fundamentally different. They've not grown up with the established process of buying from stores within home improvement. They just want the solution quickly and easily. And so their impact on this market is going to be very, very significant. And I do believe that's driving the acceleration in online growth for home improvement and garden at the moment. And they are choosing to buy from different sources. They have absolutely no loyalty to the businesses that we have known for the last 30, 40, 50 years. Those brands mean nothing to them.
Yeah, so there's this new breed of retailers, which, and I've got to say, they've, like, when you look at them, Instagram, Pinterest, they've already established an enormous following in terms of global following of, especially of young people. How does the industry, the traditional industry, re-establish their credentials now that people like Instagram, Pinterest, House exist, where they can just find inspiration and click and buy?
Well, I personally believe you're looking here at 3 brands which will probably be top 15, top 20 global retailers in the next 20 years, certainly in the Western world, certainly in the US and the UK and Europe, because these businesses, as you say, they already have the engagement with consumers. And social media businesses, they cannot exist on their own as social media businesses. They have to adapt and develop. And moving into retail is a very, very simple, easy step for them. So with Instagram and Pinterest now, to be able to buy within app, within seconds of seeing a product that inspires you is I believe, something which is going to change the market. And I do think the largest retailers now should be sitting down and thinking, right, okay, if 50% of search at the moment for products is happening on Amazon, we are then sitting in that remaining 50%. What if in 10 years' time, 50% of all purchases within home improvement are happening within marketplaces such as Instagram and Pinterest? What is our strategy now to engage with those businesses so we are at the cutting edge of that retail development as a partner with Instagram and with Pinterest and with House as this develops over the next 5 to 10 years? You can't just create a few boards and post a few nice pictures and think the job is done here. It really isn't. This is about engaging with them because they already have the consumers searching on their sites for the types of products that you're selling.
So it's basically innovating then. It's coming up with new ways to do it rather than trying to get better at the old ways, that type of thing.
Absolutely. Ways in which we've probably not even heard or thought of yet, but there are so many options out there for retailers. But their strategy has to be, what about the future? What if things change fundamentally in the future? And these social media sites are key retailers that we need to work with or partner with in some way.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of innovation, this is something that I never thought, I didn't really think about for a long time until I got advertised to by a podcast by a company that's unfortunately only based in California called Feather. And Feather free people from the burden of furniture ownership. And I'm quoting their advertising here. Basically, it's leasing furniture to people. And when I spoke to you about it, you told me, yeah, IKEA has started doing this as well. So what's the story behind this and how does this tie in?
IKEA began a trial, I think it's about 3-4 months ago now, of the option to rent furniture, originally office furniture, but looking at for consumers as well. And it was so successful, within 4 weeks, they decided to roll it out across other territories. But this feeds in again to millennials, this requirement for lovely homes, lovely gardens, and the end result without the burden of ownership during that process. We often talk about the power drill analogy, and you've got a power drill that's stored for probably 360 odd days of the year in your shed not being used. And why would you burden people with that, with all the cost and the environmental impact of bringing those products across, when you could rent them to people? That's what people want. They want to use it. So I would love to see retailers providing the option whereby you can buy a product in store, online, or you could rent a product. And that could be a power drill, because consumers will still be buying the sandpaper and all the accessories to go with that. This is what I mean about consumers being 2 or 3 steps ahead and retailers scratching their heads about how do we now engage with them. This is a great new way to be able to attract new consumers and millennials into your stores by moving to rental across certain categories.
It really is interesting. It's becoming more and more of a service. A lot of the people online here will be very, very familiar with things like software as a service because they experience it every day. And now you've got DIY retailers moving into that space more and more to offer services as opposed to just plain product.
it's all about the end result in so many parts of this industry, whether it's the resolving the problem I have from a leaking tap right the way through to I've seen that deck and that garden furniture on Instagram. That's what I want. I don't want the friction and the clutter of trying to find those products and searching. I can't be bothered to have to do that. That's what I want. I want to be told that's going to cost me £500 and I want that in the shortest possible time. Any business, and spoke about those sort of 400 projects before, the ones at the more complicated end of the scale, the bathrooms, the kitchens, the laying of the new floor, any business, whether it's a retailer or service provider, that can deliver a shorter period between the inspiration, the ideas, and the satisfaction of the job done will win in this market. It's fundamental to the future. At the moment, there is too much clutter and friction and complexity getting from stage one to the end result. And retailers have to understand it's about delivering that final piece, which is why Amazon have moved into home services. Mano Mano in France have launched Mano Mano Pro. It's why you're seeing TaskRabbit being acquired by IKEA, and why you're seeing John Lewis Services now being part of their brand program for the future to deliver those services for consumers.
Yeah, but it makes sense. It makes sense that this is where the market's going, and it's completely understandable. But what I want to do before we move on, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to some best practices, how you can optimize to take advantage of this changing marketplace, this ROPO frame of mind that people have, this research online or research offline, and purchase offline or online. So before that, what I want to get an idea is, on a personal level, when you're buying home improvement products, what kind of shopper are you? And you can choose more than one option in this poll. So feel free to choose whichever one fits you the best, or whichever two fit you the best. That maybe you do all of them. But from a personal level, when you're buying home improvement products, what kind of shopper are you? Do you research online? Do you purchase offline? Do you research offline? Do you purchase online, etc.? So I'll give you a few seconds just to fill that out, and then we will move on, talk about the best practices in optimizing your sites for the ROPO phenomenon. And as you can see here, most people research online, purchase offline, and there are very closely followed there by researching online and purchasing online. So we can see how important the online side of things is here. And what I want everybody to think about as we go through the best practices, again, is just how well does your company conform to these best practices, and how well do you think as a consumer, if you went onto your own website, you think they cater for your particular style of buying? So without further ado, let's move on. So ROPO best practices, we are going to go through the omnichannel approach, why it's important, information pages, mobile optimization, artificial intelligence, a couple of my favorites there, and the huge role in inspiration, which I think Steve's already touched on, but we'll kind of explore why that's really important in the buying process. So first of all, make omnichannel a priority. I think, Steve, we've been really banging on about this all day today, but if you do have an omnichannel presence, you have to exploit it. We've got Obi here, an example of how simple it is to prioritize your omnichannel, which is, if you look on the right-hand side of this purchase page, you don't have buy it now. You have order online, have it delivered, and a delivery time estimate. You have reserve and pick it up at your nearest store, and it already figures out which store is nearest to you. And it also tells you how many are in stock in that store. So you can reserve it, you can go down, pick it up, and have it much quicker than having it delivered, for example. And I think, Steve, you mentioned to me you'd like to see the third option appearing in there based on what we spoke about earlier, yeah?
Which is again to rent it. So you could go and collect it in store and rent it, or have it delivered and rent it for 1 day, 48 hours, a week, whatever you need. But this is a great example of what I'm seeing in some areas now, with this very, very powerful combination of content and convenience together. So great product content coupled with the ultimate inconvenience, understanding that consumers have so many different ways they may want to choose to purchase these products. So rather than just say purchase online, that's it. That's the old thinking. It really is a case of, well, so many people may want to go in store. Let's make it easy for them. And identifying the stock holding is absolutely critical. And if you're able to understand when that consumer goes in store, who they are, what they've bought as well. So for the future, when they log in online, you can talk to them about that purchase or sell them something else. So again, it's part of that bigger picture of understanding consumers.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention a little bit about that actually in a couple of slides' time as well, so we're going to expand on that. But one thing that just takes us nicely into the next slide is we've got things like obviously the product information here, but right under the title, we've got the star rating, the customer star rating, which is great information for consumers. And that brings us on to our next point, which is making information easy to find. Because you can have as much information as you want on your store. If you hide it away or if customers can't get to it, then what's the point? So we used a surprising example here, Steve, that Hobbycraft, when you type in contact into their search bar, you will then see this page here. However, in so many retailers, even though they have a contact us page, if you type contact into their search bar, it either brings up product listings with contact in the title or in the description, or it brings up no results at all. Whereas Hobbycraft here takes you directly to their contact us customer services page. They're making it very available for you to get in contact with them. But what's the top option there? Want to contact a store to check your local store stock. So that they're already assuming, they're telling you, look, if you want to buy offline, that's okay. Here is your chance to check the stock.
It's a really good example of something which you're starting to see more and more now, which is telephone numbers appearing on every single website page. There is a large proportion of customers who still want to pick up the telephone, use their mobile, and speak to a store, speak to somebody, either to find out about product availability or help. We have spent far too much time, and this is not just about product retailers, but service providers as well, hiding away the contact details within our website, because there's an on-cost of ensuring that there is a customer service center or people are available. Those businesses that make people are available to be able to engage with the consumers and help, those are the ones that will win. Let's not hide away the contact details as far deep into the website as you possibly can. Just make it simple and easy. Because I tell you what, Amazon don't do that. Amazon don't make it easy to be able for somebody to contact them. Every other retailer should be doing the opposite to what they're doing with that in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned mobiles, you mentioned people calling from their mobiles, but optimizing on mobile is one of the biggest challenges that are facing pretty much any retailer. I mean, DIY is one segment where this is a challenge, but this is so crucial across the marketplace now, because we can see that more than a third of customers are using their mobile for the entire sales cycle, for inspiration, for advice, for comparison, and then preparing to purchase online. But only 12% of people find it convenient. I mean, that's horrifically low for such a huge marketplace. And the reasons for that are so vast and so varied, but they all link back to people not optimizing their website for the smaller screen, for the mobile user. So content not being easily viewable, or videos not appearing properly, or product information you're having to scroll in 6 different directions to find it, or buttons being too small, or pop-ups. There's a list of things. So you have to optimize on mobile.
This really is basic stuff, and this is about, again, retailers catching up with where they need to be. You know, our tolerance and our patience for websites that don't open or aren't easy to use, you know, is now down to just mere seconds. If that website doesn't open, we're gone. And let's not forget here as well about optimizing for voice searching, because that's coming rapidly now. And I think when I was in Dublin at the Global Summit, there's some really interesting stats there around. Of course, if you're searching on a laptop or an iPad, then the first 6-7 companies appear on page 1 of Google. When you're searching on your mobile, the top 2 or 3 companies appear on Google. If you're searching by voice, you've got to be number 1, otherwise you're not even in the game. So this is all around, this optimization is absolutely fundamental to ensuring you deliver this omnichannel approach, and you are there for consumers and attracting them at the very start of this process when people are looking to research.
Yeah, I mean, so many people are using their phone now for inspiration, and they could be using it while they're standing in your store. And that's the thing, if they don't get a great experience on your website, they may well walk out of your store and go to the store where they got that good experience. So it's so crucial to optimize for mobile. Another thing as well, which has become a really important factor, is artificial intelligence. Now, if you are optimizing your store with artificial intelligence, then you're ahead of the game. But you have to teach it. You have to let it do the hard work. Because artificial intelligence, Steve, basically feeds into everybody's personalization and recommendation engines and things like that. So the way that it's used is that every interaction with the customer that is digital, so whether they add something to basket, whether they buy something, whether they search for a certain type of thing and then search for something else, all these interactions are fed into the AI algorithms, and with each one of those interactions, the algorithm gets smarter and smarter and smarter, and it then produces better personalized experiences for the customer and better recommendations based on what your other customers are doing. So it makes sense to make as many of your interactions with your customer, whether they are online or offline, it makes sense to get them online and fed into your AI. So that could involve emailing receipts to customers who buy in store, for example, for reserved products. If they reserve a product to pick it up in store, but then buy accessories that go with that product, make sure that that's logged in your purchase systems. So you can do that by having customer loyalty programs, or one of my favorite things that some retailers are now doing is managing warranties online. So creating accounts for customers with their online store and then having all their warranty information for these big purchases stored online. So they don't need to keep receipts. They don't need paperwork. If anything goes wrong with the product, they can log in online and they've got all the details they need there. And that feeds into the retailer's AI, and you can see that statistic at the top where in 2017 in Cyber Week, only 5% of clicks were on product recommendations, and yet that 5% generated 30% of revenue. And that's Salesforce that's found that out, so that's across industries. But 30% of revenue generated by those 5% of clicks. So the people that click on product recommendations, if you've given them good recommendations, they are much more likely to buy.
It's absolutely fundamental. Again, this goes back to the very basics of marketing, understanding your customer. That's what marketing has always been about. This is no different now, just understanding that customer, not being blind to who those customers are and what they're purchasing. Because when you know, then you're able to sell them more products or help them. And this is where the service proposition piece comes in as well, because the future will be about subscription services, where if you understand that a customer's buying a certain type of product on a regular basis or over a period of time, you can pick up within home improvement that they are decorating a new house. You know from the data you've got that they've moved recently. It's much easier then to sell them the other products in that house and even sell them home services around that too. So this year it's talked about a lot, but we have to get our head around what stage 1, 2, and 3 is in terms of utilizing AI and the benefit it can have. And all the tests that I've seen, all the examples I've seen from retailers, time and time again, this is delivering an increase in terms of sales and profits when they invest in artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now we're moving on to inspiration. So creating inspiration and aligning your strategies online and offline. Now, one of the things that I like to sort of compare is, if you imagine, Steve, if you have a kitchen store or a store that specializes in living rooms, or even IKEA, one of the first things you see when you walk in, you don't see just racks of product. What you see is a mock-up. What you see is what a living room could look like if they had all of those products in it, or what a kitchen could look like, etc. We see here on the right-hand side, Obi, again, really, like they're really thought leaders in this kind of area. They've given us this visualizer so that you can picture what your garden's going to look like depending on what fencing options you want to select, what options for tables and chairs you want to select. It's all there and it's all changeable. And it gives customers that inspiration because they can configure it themselves and they can say, wow, my garden is going to look fantastic. So it's visual, it's interactive, and that's exactly what the online merchandising should be.
It's critically important again. This whole piece, either give people the answers, so give people the ideas of how their gardens or their homes could look, or give them the tools to be able to play around with this. This is another stage of this process, and you find people will spend far more time on your website when they can use tools such as this to create how their home is going to look. And of course, the final part of this process then is to say, right, the products you've selected, this is the cost of the total project. Do you want it delivered or do you want to collect it? So you just complete the entire process, helping consumers along the way. If you're not playing in this space, if you're not inspiring, and you're just putting rack after rack of product components or items that are never brought together, either online or in store, then you're going to lose the battle. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I think it's different for the in-store. We've got a couple of examples here about how in-store needs to be different because it needs to focus on the touch and the feel. So if you look at these examples here of in-store merchandising, it's all about drawing the customer in and letting them sort of see, feel, even smell the product in garden stores and things like that. And doing that very well. But when it comes to online, it's visual, it's creative. You have to have these campaigns set up to draw them in, to really give people the inspiration that they want so that they can look at these products, they can look at the way you've laid them out, they can see everything in a campaign, and they can buy everything that's in that image. They can buy everything that's in that campaign.
Absolutely. I think that for me, it really is about those first two stages of the process. You have to be inspiring consumers and you have to be helping them if you're going to have a ROPO strategy. And it starts with that and doing that really, really well.
Yeah. So we've kind of come to the end of the presentation. I'm just going to talk a little bit about who we are as FactFinder. But first of all, obviously, I want to really thank Steve for your time today, Steve. It's been a fantastic insight into this world of ROPO and this concept that's now sort of really pervading the industry at the moment. So thank you so much for your expertise.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I just want to introduce FactFinder here. Everything we've talked about today, everything in the best practices that we think that you should be doing in order to take advantage of this ROPO market is available through FactFinder. We are a conversion increase specialist. We increase the sales conversions on your website, and we do that with a fully AI capable algorithm. So every time the customer interacts with you, our solution just gets better and better. We can help you with merchandising and personalization, with guided selling, with search and navigation optimization, ranking rules so that you can display the products your customers want to see and the ones that you want them to see. And of course, that crucial aspect of it, we can make your site mobile friendly. We've had some great successes with some of our customers that we've seen today. So Hobbycraft, their conversion online went up by 170% by getting content to their customers faster, by engaging their customers more through intuitive navigation. Globus Baumarkt used a complete merchandising overhaul and increased their conversion by 20% by using things like targeted product placement, by really personalizing the experience for their customers. And Obi have over 300 stores and 60,000 items. And as we saw earlier, everything is now connected through FactFinder, through their merchandising tools, their optimized search and navigation, and guided selling as well, that really brings that in-store experience online by engaging the customer a little bit more. And we can see that they had their geotagging and their stock availability there available for their customers. So they really, really have embraced the omnichannel approach through FactFinder and optimized incredibly well. We are now involved with 1,600 shops across Europe and the rest of the world, in fact. We've been 18 years in the world of e-commerce. We're the market leader in Europe. We're German engineered technology. We've got offices across Europe, as you can see here. And we've got customers across Europe. Some really big names like Lidl, MediaMarkt. You can see Bugatti, there's tons and tons and tons of different types of industry that we have helped to optimize. So the DIY and the gardening industry is just one of them, but it's one of our favorites. If you would like to send any questions through, again, here are my contact details. Please do visit our website as well and find out a little bit more about who FactFinder are. And as I said, I'll get back to everybody who's asked a question individually and make sure that your questions are all asked. Steve, thank you once again.
You're very
pleasure having you online. And thanks to everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you on our next webinar.